A kingpin falls not by a rival's bullet, but from a vintage Cabernet poured by the woman who swore him forever. As his lungs failed and his vision blurred, his multi-million-dollar empire meant nothing. His only hope? A minimum-wage courier who took the wrong elevator on a Tuesday night. Dominic Gallo did not believe in ghosts, but he believed in the power of an impenetrable fortress. His penthouse atop 432 Park Avenue in Manhattan was exactly that. Suspended 1,000 feet above the glittering grid of New York City, it was a sanctuary of silence, isolated from the sirens and the grid of the streets he secretly controlled. Dominic, the undisputed head of the Gallo Syndicate, was a man who traded in fear, racketeering, and port importations. Yet, inside these walls, he was simply a husband. Tonight was their 5th anniversary. The dining table, a massive slab of imported black marble, was set with baccarat crystal and heavy silver. Across from him sat Victoria. She was a vision in an emerald silk dress that clung to her perfectly sculpted frame, the Cartier diamond necklace he had bought her gleaming against her collarbone. Victoria was the daughter of a rival family boss, a marriage brokered for peace, which had surprisingly blossomed into genuine passion. Or so Dominic thought. "You're quiet tonight, Vic," Dominic noted, his deep baritone cutting through the soft jazz, playing from the hidden surround sound speakers. He sliced into a medium-rare filet mignon, his customized Patek Philippe watch catching the dim chandelier light. Victoria offered a smile that didn't quite reach her dark, calculating eyes. "Just reflecting, Dom. 5 years is a long time in our world. Most men in your position don't make it to C35, let alone a 5th wedding anniversary." "I'm not most men," Dominic replied with a confident smirk. He reached for his glass, swirling the dark crimson liquid inside. It was a 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, a bottle that cost more than a decent car, opened specifically for tonight. "I know," Victoria said softly. She stood up, her heels clicking rhythmically against the hardwood floor as she walked over to him. She placed a manicured hand on his broad shoulder, her touch light, almost phantom-like. "You are entirely unique. That's why this had to be perfect." Dominic took a long, satisfying sip of the wine. The vintage was complex, earthy, with a finish that felt unusually sharp against the back of his throat. He set the glass down and looked up at his wife. "The chef outdid himself, though I prefer it when we have the place completely to ourselves. Speaking of, where are your security details?" "I gave them the night off," Victoria whispered, stepping back out of his reach. "I wanted absolute privacy." Dominic frowned, a sudden, primal instinct flaring in his chest. A heavy, unnatural heat began to bloom in his stomach. He tried to brush it off as indigestion, but within seconds, the heat morphed into a searing, agonizing cramp. He gasped, dropping his heavy silver fork. It clattered loudly against the porcelain plate. "Vic?" he choked out, his voice suddenly sounding hollow. The room began to tilt. The glittering skyline of Manhattan, outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, smeared into streaks of neon light. Victoria stood perfectly still, watching him with an expression devoid of any human warmth. She crossed her arms. "The thing about power, Dominic, is that it makes you arrogant. You spent millions fortifying the doors, hiring guards, and encrypting your servers. But you forgot the most basic rule of history. Empires aren't conquered from the outside. They rot from within." Dominic tried to stand, to grab her, to do anything, but his legs were leaden. A terrifying paralysis was creeping up his limbs. It was aconite wolfsbane mixed meticulously with a synthetic paralytic agent, tasteless in heavy red wine, fatal within minutes, and nearly impossible to detect in a standard autopsy without specific suspicion. He crashed heavily to the floor, taking the silk tablecloth and a spray of shattered crystal with him. The breath hitched in his throat, his lungs refusing to expand. He looked up at his wife, his vision tunneling, betrayal burning hotter than the poison coursing through his veins. "Why?" he managed to wheeze, bloody saliva pooling at the corner of his mouth. "Because my father's empire was swallowed by yours," Victoria said coldly, stepping carefully over a puddle of spilled wine so as not to stain her Louboutins. "And because the Colombians offered me $80 million and undisputed control of the East Coast ports if I handed them the decryption keys to your ledger." She knelt beside him, her perfume, a heavy scent of jasmine and vanilla, nauseating him in his final moments. She reached into his tailored suit jacket and extracted the heavy biometric flash drive he always kept over his heart. "Goodbye, Dominic," she whispered. "The cleaning crew will be here in 20 minutes. It will look like a tragic, sudden, cardiac arrest. The grieving widow will inherit it all." Without a backward glance, Victoria walked to the private elevator, keyed in her code, and disappeared, leaving the most feared man in New York to drown in his own failing body. The silence of the penthouse returned, broken only by Dominic's ragged, wet gasps for air. He was entirely alone, trapped in a golden cage, waiting for the dark. 2 miles south, the relentless freezing rain of a New York November was punishing the streets. Liam Henderson sat in his beat-up 2008 Honda Civic, the heater barely coughing out lukewarm air. He was 22, exhausted, and running on 3 hours of sleep. A mechanical engineering student by day, Liam spent his nights delivering food to keep the lights on and to pay down his mother's mounting hospital bills at Mount Sinai. His phone dinged with a notification. Uber Eats, high-paying order, pick up at Hell's Kitchen, drop off at 432 Park Avenue. Liam sighed, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. Delivering to Billionaires Row was always a nightmare of service entrances and arrogant concierges. But the tip was guaranteed to be good. He grabbed the thermal bag holding 2 orders of pad thai and braved the downpour. 30 minutes later, dripping wet in a cheap, neon-yellow windbreaker, Liam stood in the loading dock of the ultra-luxury residential tower. The night shift security guard barely looked up from his tablet. "Delivery for the 88th floor," Liam said, shaking the rain from his hair. "Service elevator, C," the guard grunted, waving a keycard at a scanner. "Don't loiter. Drop it and go." Liam stepped into the sterile, steel-clad elevator and hit the button for 88. The car shot upward with stomach-dropping speed, but at the 70th floor, the elevator jolted violently. The lights flickered, and the digital display scrambled. Instead of stopping at 88, the car kept ascending, bypassing the residential tiers until it hit the very top. The doors slid open with a soft ding. Liam stepped out cautiously. This wasn't a hallway. It was a private foyer lined with mahogany, leading directly to a massive set of double doors. One of the doors was propped open by a shattered crystal wine glass. "Hello?" Liam called out. "Food delivery?" No answer. Only a strange, wet, choking sound coming from the shadows of the living room. Liam hesitated. Every instinct he had developed growing up in Queens screamed at him to get back in the elevator. But the choking sound grew more desperate. It sounded like an animal caught in a trap. Pushing the heavy door open further, Liam stepped onto the plush, cream-colored rug. He froze. Lying in the center of the room, amidst broken glass and spilled wine, was a man in a bespoke tuxedo. The man's face was pale, his lips tinted a terrifying shade of blue, and his eyes were rolled back. He was violently convulsing. "Hey, sir!" Liam dropped his thermal bag and rushed over, sliding to his knees. He grabbed the man's shoulders. "Sir, can you hear me? I'm calling 911. Liam fumbled in his soaked pocket for his phone, his hands shaking. But before he could dial the 3 digits, a heavy, cold hand shot out and gripped his wrist with terrifying, desperate strength. Dominic Gallo forced his eyes to focus on the blurry figure in yellow. It took every ounce of his failing neurological system to form words. "No, cops," Dominic wheezed, blood bubbling at his lips. "They're bought. Dead man. If they come." Liam stared in horror. You're dying, man. I have to call an ambulance. Phone, Dominic gasped, weakly tapping his own pocket. Speed dial. 1. Dr. Eris. Liam, panicking, reached into the man's jacket and pulled out a heavy, encrypted satellite phone. He bypassed the lock screen, which was already disabled, and held the single button. The line rang twice before a gruff voice answered. Dom? It's 3 a.m. Hello? Liam stammered. I'm a delivery driver. I found this guy on the floor. He's turning blue. He told me to call you. There was a terrifying, dead silence on the line. Then Dr. Eris's voice returned, razor sharp and deadly calm. Is he foaming at the mouth? Are his pupils dilated or pinpoints? Pinpoints. And he can't breathe. Listen to me very carefully, kid, Eris commanded. That's a neurotoxin. He has maybe 4 minutes before his heart stops. Where are you? 432 Park Avenue. The penthouse. Get him out of there, Eris snapped. If whoever poisoned him comes back, you're both dead. Drag him to the service elevator. I'm 10 minutes away. I'll meet you in the underground parking garage. Sector D. Do not let his airway close. If you have to, break his nose to shock his nervous system. Move. The line went dead. Liam dropped the phone. The sheer absurdity and terror of the situation crashed over him. He was a broke college student. He didn't sign up for mob hits and neurotoxins. He could run. He could leave right now, get back in the elevator, and pretend he never saw a thing. Dominic's grip on Liam's wrist went slack. The kingpin's chest stopped moving. Damn it, Liam swore loudly. He couldn't let a man die in front of him. Operating purely on adrenaline, Liam grabbed Dominic by the lapels of his ruined tuxedo and hauled him up. The man was pure muscle and dead weight. Liam strained, his cheap sneakers slipping on the polished marble floors as he dragged Dominic toward the foyer. Come on, stay with me, man, Liam grunted, pulling Dominic backward through the double doors and into the private elevator lobby. Just as Liam dragged him inside the elevator car and slammed his hand on the lobby button, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. The soft ding of the main residential elevator arriving. As the service elevator doors slowly began to slide shut, Liam caught a glimpse through the narrowing gap. 3 men stepped into the penthouse. They wore dark suits, surgical gloves, and held suppressed tactical pistols. They were the cleaning crew Victoria had promised. The service doors clicked shut just as one of the men turned toward the foyer. The elevator began its rapid descent. Liam collapsed against the metal wall, panting heavily, looking down at the dying mafia boss at his feet. Dominic wasn't breathing. Remembering the doctor's brutal instructions, Liam balled his fist, squeezed his eyes shut, and struck Dominic hard across the bridge of his nose. The cartilage cracked loudly in the confined space. Instantly, Dominic's chest heaved. He sucked in a massive, ragged breath of air, his eyes flying open in shock before rolling back again. He was barely holding on. Just hold on, Liam whispered, wiping sweat and rain from his own forehead as the floor indicator flashed rapidly downward. I'm getting you out of here. The delivery boy had just crossed a point of no return. By pulling Dominic Gallo into that elevator, Liam Henderson had just intertwined his fate with the most dangerous underworld empire in America. The service elevator plummeted like a stone, the floor indicator flashing rapidly. 40, 30, 15. Lobby. B1, B2, B3. With a harsh, metallic groan, the doors slid open to the subterranean parking garage. The air down here was frigid, thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and damp concrete. Liam Henderson dragged the massive, unconscious frame of Dominic Gallo out of the cab, his muscles screaming in protest. Every shadow in the dimly lit garage looked like a hitman. Every distant echo of water dripping sounded like a suppressed gunshot. Sector D, Liam muttered to himself, his breath pluming in the cold air. He hauled Dominic past rows of luxury vehicles, gleaming Ferraris, armored Maybachs, and sleek Aston Martins, feeling entirely out of place in his soaked, neon-yellow windbreaker. Tires screeched. Headlights blinded Liam as a matte black Mercedes Sprinter van tore around a concrete pillar and slammed on its brakes inches from them. The side door slid open before the vehicle even fully stopped. A tall man with silver hair and a sharp, aristocratic face leapt out, carrying a heavy trauma kit. This was Dr. Eris Caldwell, a former Johns Hopkins chief of surgery, whose gambling debts had led him into the lucrative, secretive employ of the Gallo family. Behind him stepped a mountain of a man with a scarred jaw. Matteo, Dominic's most loyal enforcer, who had been off duty but summoned by Eris's emergency code. "Get him in!" Eris barked, not wasting a syllable on pleasantries. Matteo grabbed Dominic by the shoulders, lifting the heavy kingpin as easily as if he were a child, and hauled him into the back of the van. Liam stood frozen, his hands stained with the blood from Dominic's broken nose. He took a step back, ready to run. "I did what you said. I'm leaving now." Matteo's massive hand shot out, grabbing Liam by the collar of his windbreaker. "You aren't going anywhere, kid. Get in." "I have deliveries. I have exams." Liam protested, panic spiking. "You have a death sentence if you walk out of here," Eris said coldly, already ripping open Dominic's tailored shirt. "The men upstairs are professionals. They will pull the security footage. They will see your face, your cheap jacket, and your thermal bag. By morning, Victoria Gallo will have a bounty on your head that every hitter in the 5 boroughs will want to collect. You are officially a ghost. Get in the van." Realization crashed over Liam like icy water. He was trapped. Swallowing his terror, he climbed into the back of the van. Matteo slammed the door shut, plunging them into the harsh, clinical light of the mobile surgical suite, and yelled at the driver to move. The van tore out of the garage, blending into the chaotic, rain-swept traffic of the FDR Drive. Inside, it was a war zone. Eris was a blur of calculated motion. He shoved a breathing tube down Dominic's throat and connected it to a portable ventilator. The machine hissed and clicked, forcing air into the Mafia Boss's paralyzed lungs. "Aconite cocktail," Eris diagnosed, shining a penlight into Dominic's unresponsive, pinpoint pupils. Victoria always was a theatrical bitch. "Matteo, I need the atropine and the heavy metal chelators. Prepare a central line." For the next 2 hours, Liam huddled in the corner of the speeding van, watching a man be pulled back from the absolute brink of death. Eris worked with a terrifying, blood-soaked efficiency. Needles pierced skin. Vials of clear liquids were emptied into IV bags. The heart monitor shrieked a flat line twice, requiring Eris to use a portable defibrillator to shock Dominic's heart back into a ragged, uneven rhythm. Finally, as the van pulled into an abandoned warehouse district in Red Hook, Brooklyn, the heart monitor settled into a steady, weak beep. "He's stabilized," Eris exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of a bloody latex glove. He turned his piercing gray eyes on Liam. "You broke his nose?" Liam shrank back. "You told me to. You said shock his system." Eris stared at him for a long moment. Then a dark chuckle escaped his lips. "I did. And you actually had the spine to do it. You saved his life, kid. But you also just ruined your own." They transported Dominic into a subterranean bunker, hidden beneath a dilapidated meatpacking facility. It was a fully stocked safe house, a relic from the old mob wars, complete with a medical bay, an armory, and a bank of encrypted servers. It took 48 hours for the paralytic agent to fully flush from Dominic's system. During that time, Liam was a prisoner, pacing the concrete floors, terrified for his mother at Mount Sinai. He explained his situation to Matteo, who merely grunted and confiscated Liam's phone, snapping the SIM card in half. On the 3rd day, Dominic Gallo woke up. He didn't thrash or scream. His dark eyes simply snapped open, staring at the concrete ceiling. He slowly pulled the oxygen cannula from his nose and sat up, his muscles trembling from the aftershocks of the poison. He looked down at his hands, realizing he was alive. Then, the memories hit him. Victoria's cold smile, the red wine, the betrayal. A low, guttural sound vibrated in his chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated vengeance. Eris stepped into the medical bay, followed cautiously by Liam. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Dom." Dominic's gaze shifted to Eris, then locked onto Liam, the delivery boy in the cheap clothes. The memory of the elevator, the brutal punch to the face, the desperate voice. "You," Dominic rasped, his voice sounding like grinding stones. "You pulled me out." "Yeah," Liam said, nervously wiping his sweaty palms on his jeans. "And now your doctor says I can't go home because your wife is going to have me killed." Dominic swung his legs over the side of the cot. Despite wearing a simple hospital gown, he radiated a terrifying, magnetic authority. He looked at Eris. Status. "Victoria held a press conference yesterday," Eris reported grimly, handing Dominic a tablet. Tears, black veil, the whole performance. "She claimed you died of a sudden, massive coronary aneurysm. The medical examiner was heavily bribed. She's assumed full control of the Gallo syndicate. Worse, she met with Emilio Ramirez of the Colombian cartel this morning. The ledger is in their hands. The ports are compromised." Dominic stared at the tablet, watching the video of his wife weeping flawlessly for the cameras. His expression was utterly unreadable. "She took the biometric drive. She has the vault codes. She thinks she has stripped me down to the bone." He slowly stood up, testing his weight. He walked over to Liam, towering over the younger man. Liam held his ground, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "What's your name, kid?" Dominic asked. "Liam. Liam Henderson." "Liam Henderson," Dominic repeated, tasting the syllables. "You lost your job. You lost your normal life. Eris is right. If you step back out into the sun, Victoria's men will skin you alive just to make sure there are no loose ends. But you saved a king, and a king always pays his debts." "I don't want your money," Liam said, his voice trembling but defiant. "I just want to make sure my mother is okay. She's at Mount Sinai. She needs a lung transplant. If I miss my payments, they'll kick her off the donor list." Dominic turned to Matteo. "Call the hospital administrator at Mount Sinai. Use the Cayman Slush Fund. Move Mrs. Henderson to the VIP penthouse wing. Pay off the entire medical board if you have to. Bump her to the absolute top of the National Transplant Registry." Liam's jaw dropped. You can do that?" "I am Dominic Gallo," he said softly, a dark fire igniting in his eyes. "I may be a dead man, Liam, but even from hell, I can move mountains. Now, you work for me." 2 weeks passed. The subterranean bunker in Red Hook became a war room. Dominic's physical recovery was brutal but rapid. Fueled by a quiet, burning rage, he pushed himself through grueling physical therapy, transforming his weakened body back into a weapon. Yet, he knew Braun wouldn't reclaim his empire. Victoria had severed all his alliances, bought off his capos, and fortified her position with Colombian cartel muscle. Dominic was a ghost, and ghosts couldn't declare open war. They had to haunt. He needed to strike at her most prized possession, the encrypted ledger. The drive she stole contains the routing numbers to $3 billion in offshore accounts, plus the blackmail files on half the state legislature. Dominic explained one evening. He was standing over a massive blueprint of Manhattan, spread across a metal table. "But Victoria is smart. She knows I'm paranoid. She doesn't realize that the biometric drive is entirely useless without a secondary physical cipher." Liam, who had spent the last 2 weeks maintaining the bunker's failing ventilation systems with scavenged parts, wiped grease from his hands and walked over. "A 2-factor authentication, but hardware-based?" Dominic looked at the young engineering student with a hint of respect. In the past fortnight, Liam had proven to be incredibly resourceful. He wasn't a hardened criminal, but he was sharp, desperate, and fiercely intelligent. Exactly, Dominic said. Without the cipher, the drive will automatically wipe its data after 10 failed decryption attempts. Victoria will be stalling Ramirez, pretending she's just organizing the transfer. She's looking for the cipher. Where is it? Liam asked. In the last place a billionaire mafia boss would ever put something valuable. Dominic smirked. A rusty, forgotten safety deposit box in a decaying, mob-owned credit union in the Bronx, under a fake name. The problem is, Victoria has locked down the city. Her men are watching all my known associates, all my old haunts. If Mateo or Eris walk into that bank, they'll be recognized and shot before they reach the teller. Dominic slid his gaze over to Liam. But nobody knows the delivery boy. Liam swallowed hard. You want me to walk into a mafia-controlled bank and steal a vault key? You aren't stealing it. You're retrieving it, Dominic corrected, sliding a forged New York driver's license and a weathered brass key across the table. The name is Julian. No. Let's use Arthur Pendleton. The box is under Arthur Pendleton. You dress in your courier gear. You carry a clipboard. You belong everywhere, Liam. That's the magic of a uniform. People look right through you. Liam stared at the key. His mother was currently resting in a luxury suite, breathing easily under the care of the city's top pulmonologists, all paid for by the man standing in front of him. He owed Dominic, and, strangely, he found himself drawn into the magnetic orbit of the fallen king. Dominic wasn't the monster the news portrayed. He was ruthless, yes, but he operated on a strict code of loyalty, a code Victoria had shattered. What does the cipher look like? Liam asked, picking up the key. Dominic's lips curled into a genuine smile. It looks like an antique pocket watch. Once you have it, we bring her empire crashing down. The next morning, Liam found himself stepping off the subway at the Grand Concourse in the Bronx. He wore his faded yellow windbreaker, a baseball cap pulled low, and carried a bulky thermal delivery bag to complete the illusion. The November chill bit at his face, but he was sweating underneath the jacket. The credit union was a miserable, gray stone building flanked by two heavily tattooed men, smoking cigarettes. Cartel soldiers, Ramirez's men, loaned to Victoria to secure her new assets. Liam forced his heart rate down. You belong everywhere, Dominic's voice echoed in his head. He walked briskly, head down, looking at a fake invoice on his clipboard. Delivery for the manager, Liam muttered as he bypassed the guards, acting annoyed and rushed. The guards barely glanced at him, stepping aside to let the lowly gig worker pass. Inside, the bank was a front. There were no real customers, just a bored teller filing her nails behind bulletproof glass. Can I help you? The teller sighed. I need access to the vault, Liam said, slipping the forged ID and the brass key under the glass. Arthur Pendleton. The teller glanced at the ID, then typed lazily into her ancient computer. A moment later, a heavy buzzer sounded, and a thick steel door to her left clicked open. Box 404. You know the drill. 5 minutes. Liam stepped into the vault. The air was stale and smelled of old paper and dust. He quickly located box 404, inserted the brass key, and pulled out the long metal tray. Inside sat a beautiful, intricate gold pocket watch. It was surprisingly heavy. He slipped it into his pocket, pushed the tray back, and turned to leave. Suddenly, the heavy steel door of the vault swung open violently. Standing in the doorway was a man Liam had seen on the news, standing right behind Victoria during her fake morning press conference. It was Silas. No, it was Marcus. Wait. Dominic had warned him about a man named Bastien, a towering, vicious enforcer who used to be Dominic's lieutenant, now Victoria's right hand. Bastien was accompanied by 2 cartel thugs. Lock the front doors, Bastien barked over his shoulder to the teller. He stepped into the vault, his dark eyes locking onto Liam. Bastien didn't recognize him as the delivery boy from the penthouse. The footage had been grainy, but he recognized someone who didn't belong. Well, well, Bastien purred, pulling a silver switchblade from his pocket and flicking it open. Victoria had a feeling Dom might have kept a secret stash in this dump. Who the hell are you, kid? And what did you just take out of that box? Liam backed up against the cold steel of the deposit boxes. He had no weapon, no backup, and he was trapped in a concrete box with 3 killers. His engineering mind raced, calculating variables, looking for an exit that didn't exist. He slipped his hand into his pocket, his fingers wrapping around the cold, heavy gold of the pocket watch. "I'm just a courier," Liam said, forcing his voice to remain steady, stepping into the role Dominic had carved out for him. "And you're standing in my way." Bastien lunged, the switchblade gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the vault. Liam Henderson didn't have a gun, but he had an engineering student's understanding of physics and momentum. He gripped the heavy steel safety deposit box tray and swung it with all his might. The solid metal edge connected brutally with Bastien's wrist, shattering bone and sending the knife skittering across the floor. Before the 2 cartel thugs could raise their suppressed pistols, a deafening crash echoed from the front lobby. The bank's thick glass doors shattered inward. The lights instantly cut out, plunging the vault into pitch darkness. Boss said to keep an eye on the kid. A low, gravelly voice rumbled from the blackness. Silenced gunshots thwipped rapidly through the air, followed by the heavy thuds of bodies hitting the floor. Someone grabbed Liam by the back of his neon-yellow windbreaker and hauled him out of the vault. It was Mateo. He was wearing night vision goggles and holding a smoking tactical rifle. "Keep moving, courier," Mateo grunted, tossing a flashbang into the lobby to blind the remaining guards outside. They burst out of the rear fire exit, sprinting through a rain-slicked alleyway and diving into the waiting matte black Sprinter van. Liam collapsed onto the metal floor, gasping for air, his hands shaking violently as he pulled the heavy gold pocket watch from his pocket. "I got it," Liam panted, holding it up as Dr. Eris Caldwell pulled the van into traffic. 40 minutes later, they were back in the subterranean bunker in Red Hook. Dominic stood by the server racks, dressed in a sharp, dark suit that hid the lingering pallor of his near-death experience. He took the watch from Liam, his thumb tracing the intricate engravings on the casing. "Victoria thinks she holds the keys to the kingdom," Dominic murmured, a cold, dangerous smile touching his lips. He pressed a hidden latch near the watch's winding stem. The backplate popped open, revealing not gears, but a sophisticated, custom-built radio frequency transmitter. "She has the biometric drive," Dominic explained, plugging a cable from the watch into his laptop. "But I built a failsafe. This transmitter sends an encrypted signal to the offshore servers. It initiates a complete financial drain and a localized data wipe on the physical drive she stole." He hit the enter key. A progress bar flashed on the screen. "Transferring funds. Wiping master ledger. $3 billion just moved into ghost accounts she doesn't know exist," Dominic said, stepping back from the monitor. "Now, we go home." High above Manhattan, in the glittering penthouse at 432 Park Avenue, Victoria Gallo was celebrating. She stood in her immaculate living room, pouring vintage champagne for Emilio Ramirez, the ruthless head of the Colombian cartel. To a new era, Victoria toasted, her eyes shining with triumph. "The port routes are yours, Emilio. My husband's infrastructure is entirely at your disposal." Ramirez smiled, taking the crystal flute. "And the funds? The proof of your leverage?" "Right here," Victoria said smoothly. She walked over to her laptop, retrieving the heavy biometric flash drive from her purse. She pressed her thumb to the scanner and plugged it in. A red error message flashed across the screen. "Data corrupted. Balance $0. Victoria's blood ran cold. She clicked frantically, opening folder after folder. Empty. All of them. The blackmail files, the routing numbers, the syndicate's operational history gone. Ramirez's smile vanished. He set his champagne down on the marble table. Is this a joke, Victoria? You brought me here to hand over an empty drive? No, wait. There must be a glitch, she stammered, panic finally cracking her flawless facade. Dominic must have set a timer. The soft ding of the private elevator echoed through the penthouse. Victoria froze. She had dismissed her guards for this private meeting, just as she had done 2 weeks ago. Ramirez's hands instinctively went to the heavy pistols holstered under his jacket. The mahogany double doors slowly pushed open. Dominic Gallo stepped into the foyer. He looked like a man who had walked out of his own grave to collect a debt. His eyes were devoid of any mercy as they locked onto his wife. You forgot to check my pulse, Vic, Dominic said, his voice echoing in the dead silence of the room. Victoria backed away, her face draining of color. Dominic, you're dead. I watched you die. I had a guardian angel, Dominic replied coldly. He looked past her to the cartel boss. Emilio, I assume my wife promised you my empire. As you can see, she has nothing to give. Her accounts are empty. Her leverage is gone. She is a liability. Ramirez looked at the terrified woman, then back to the resurrected kingpin. The cartel boss understood the shift in power instantly. He slowly took his hands off his weapons and offered a sharp nod of respect to Dominic. She wasted my time, Gallo, Ramirez said in heavily accented English. And she tried to steal what belongs to you. Feel free to collect a tax for your wasted time, Dominic said, turning his back on his wife without a second glance. Dominic, please, Victoria screamed, dropping to her knees as Ramirez's men stepped out from the shadows of the hallway. Dominic. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut behind him, sealing her fate. A week later, Liam Henderson walked out of Mount Sinai Hospital. The crisp winter air felt different today. His mother was sitting up, laughing, her medical charts displaying numbers that the doctors called miraculous. As Liam reached the sidewalk, a black Maybach pulled up beside him. The tinted window rolled down, revealing Dominic Gallo in the back seat. Get in, Dominic said. Liam slid into the luxurious leather interior. Dominic handed him a heavy, locked briefcase and a piece of paper with a combination code. Your mother's medical bills are permanently covered, and she's receiving her transplant next month, Dominic said quietly. Inside that case is enough cash to pay for your engineering degree, 10 times over. And a new identity, just in case. Why are you doing all this? Liam asked, staring at the briefcase. I just did what anyone would do. No, you didn't, Dominic corrected him. In my world, people walk away. You stayed. You're out of the game now, Liam. Focus on your engines. Build something that lasts. Liam nodded, a profound sense of gratitude washing over him. He stepped out of the car, watching as the Maybach merged seamlessly into the chaotic New York traffic, disappearing into the city that the Ghost King ruled once more. Liam Henderson never delivered another takeout order. His mother recovered fully, resting in a seaside villa, paid for by a phantom benefactor. Dominic Gallo reclaimed his throne, ruling his dark empire from the shadows, a ghost king who learned that true loyalty cannot be bought. The world believed him dead, but in the criminal underworld, the legend of the resurrected boss and his courier would echo forever.